The champagne flute slipped from my hand, shattering across the marble floor. My father-in-law's words hung in the air like poison gas. The idiot still believes the girl is his. Kenji visits every Tuesday. My name is Liam Caldwell, and I'm a 34-year-old software engineer from Toronto. 3 years ago, I married Hannah Sato, a beautiful woman I met at a tech conference in Vancouver. Her family had moved to Canada from Osaka when she was 15, but they still spoke Japanese at home. I'd spent 4 years living in Tokyo working for Sony, becoming fluent in Japanese to the point where I could understand regional dialects and business nuance. Hannah never asked about my time in Japan. She assumed, like most Canadians, that I was just another tech bro who knew how to order sushi. Our daughter, Mia, was 2 years old. She had Hannah's delicate features, but none of my coloring. I'd noticed it before, the way people would look at Mia and then at me with confused expressions. Strangers in grocery stores would ask if I was the nanny. I'd laughed it off. Genetics are weird, right? My grandmother was blonde. Maybe Mia got some recessive genes. The dinner party was at the Sato family estate in the bridle path. Hannah's parents, Takashi and Emi, had made their fortune in import-export, and they loved to show it off. Crystal chandeliers, art worth more than my annual salary, and a dining table that could seat 20 people comfortably. Hannah's brother, Run, was there with his wife. Hannah's aunt and uncle had flown in from San Francisco. Everyone was speaking English when I was in the room, laughing at appropriate moments, making small talk about the weather and the housing market. I excused myself to use the washroom. When I returned, I stopped just outside the dining room entrance. They'd switched to Japanese, thinking I was still upstairs. Takashi was refilling wine glasses, speaking casually. Liam is useful for now. The citizenship process takes time, and having a Canadian husband makes everything simpler. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face neutral, standing just out of sight. Emmy laughed, a high, tinkling sound I'd always found charming. Now, it sounded like breaking glass. He's so devoted to Mia. It's actually quite touching. He has no idea Kenji is the real father. The resemblance is obvious to anyone with eyes. Ren snorted. Does Kenji still come by on Tuesdays when Liam is at the office? Hannah's voice, my wife's voice, was casual and cold. Of course. Mia needs to know her real father. I tell Liam I'm at yoga classes. He never questions it. The aunt spoke up, her voice dripping with amusement. What happens when the 3-year citizenship requirement is met? Will you divorce him then? Hannah paused, and I could picture her sipping her wine thoughtfully. Probably. I'll take half his stock options from the company. By then, Mia will be old enough for kindergarten, and Kenji will have divorced his wife. We can be together properly. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, but I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right now, I was calculating. 3 years married meant she was still a year away from automatic citizenship. Kenji had a wife. Mia wasn't mine. The yoga classes were lies. How much of our life together was real? I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and walked into the dining room with a bright smile. Sorry about that. I got a work call I had to take. The table went silent for a fraction of a second, long enough for me to notice. Then everyone resumed their English conversation, seamless as actors in a play. I sat down next to Hannah and kissed her cheek. She smiled at me, the same smile I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. It felt like kissing a stranger. Takashi raised his glass. A toast to family, to prosperity, and to the bonds that tie us together. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine, too, looking directly at Takashi. Then I spoke in perfect, businesslike Japanese. Yes, let's toast to family. To husbands who work 60-hour weeks to provide for children who aren't theirs. To wives who spend Tuesdays with their real partners while their husbands think they're at yoga. To in-laws who view citizenship as a commodity and their son-in-law as a useful tool. The color drained from every face at the table. Hannah's wine glass slipped from her hand, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Emmy's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Liam, we didn't. You speak Japanese. I switched to English, keeping my tone conversational. I lived in Tokyo for 4 years, worked at Sony's headquarters. I'm fluent in Japanese, including Kansai Ben, which is what you slip into when you're being particularly cruel. Liam. Takashi tried to recover, his businessman instincts kicking in. Liam, there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted, still calm. I heard exactly what you all said. Every word. About Kenji, about Mia, about the citizenship scheme, about the divorce plans, about my stock options. Hannah grabbed my arm, her face pale. Liam, please let me explain. I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. Explain what? That our entire marriage has been a fraud? That you've been sleeping with another man for the past 3 years? That my daughter isn't my daughter? Ren stood up, trying to assert some authority. You need to calm down and think rationally about this. I am calm, I said, and it was true. I felt cold analytical. The software engineer part of my brain was running through scenarios, calculating probabilities. I'm also leaving tonight. I'll be staying at a hotel. Hannah started crying, reaching for me. Liam, please, we can work this out. I love you. Mia loves you. Does she? I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. Or does Mia love Kenji, the man who comes by every Tuesday while I'm working to pay for this life you're living? I stood up, pushing my chair back. I'll be filing for divorce. And before you think about taking half my stock options, you should know that I signed a prenuptial agreement. My lawyer made sure everything I owned before the marriage stays mine. Since you committed fraud by marrying me solely for citizenship, I'll be contesting any claims you have to marital assets. The next morning, I drove straight to a lawyer's office. Arthur Sterling was a family law specialist, with a reputation for being ruthless but fair. He listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Do you have evidence? He asked when I finished. I recorded the conversation on my phone, I said. I started recording when I heard them speaking Japanese outside the dining room. Arthur's eyebrows went up. That's tricky in Canada regarding privacy laws, depending on context. But it tells me what we're dealing with. We'll need to gather legal evidence. First step, paternity test for Mia. If she's not biologically yours, that changes everything about custody and support obligations. I raised her for 2 years, I said quietly. I changed her diapers, walked her when she couldn't sleep, taught her to say dada. I love that little girl. Arthur's expression softened. I understand. But legally, if you're not the biological father and there was fraud involved, you have no obligation to continue. The question is, what do you want? What did I want? I drove home to our townhouse in the beaches, my mind spinning. Hannah wasn't there. She'd texted saying she was staying at her parents' house. I walked through our home, seeing it differently now. The expensive furniture Hannah had insisted on. The art pieces from Japan that I'd thought were sentimental, but now realized were probably gifts from Kenji. The photos on the wall of our small family. All lies. I went to Mia's room. She was at daycare and wouldn't be home until evening. Her stuffed animals were arranged on her bed the way I taught her. The books we read together every night were stacked on her shelf. The drawing she'd made of our family was stuck to the wall with tape. Stick figures labeled Mama, Dada, and me. I sat on her tiny bed and cried for the first time since the dinner party. The paternity test took 2 weeks. I used a court-ordered lab to ensure the results would be admissible as evidence. During those 2 weeks, Hannah tried everything. She called constantly, left voicemails begging me to come home. She sent texts saying it was all a misunderstanding, that she did love me, that we could start over. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I hired a private investigator. If I couldn't use the recording, I needed other evidence. The PI's name was Veronica Chong. She was a former federal police officer who now ran her own investigation firm in Mississauga. What exactly do you need? Veronica asked during our first meeting. Proof of an ongoing affair, I said. Proof that my wife has been seeing this man regularly. Photographs, timestamps, anything that will hold up in court. Veronica nodded. I'll need details. The man's name, workplace, vehicle description, your wife's schedule. I provided everything I knew. Kenji Nakamura worked in commercial real estate, drove a black Tesla Model S, and according to what I'd overheard, visited every Tuesday between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. while I was at work. Veronica got to work. 1 week later, she handed me a manila folder containing photographs that made my stomach turn. Kenji entering my townhouse at 10:37 a.m. on a Tuesday. Kenji leaving at 1:52 p.m., adjusting his tie. Another Tuesday, another set of photos. Kenji's hand on Hannah's waist as they stood in my doorway. Mia, my Mia, holding Kenji's hand as they walked to his Tesla. There's more, Veronica said quietly. Kenji's wife filed for divorce 2 months ago. She cited infidelity. I spoke to her lawyer off the record. She's been aware of the affair with Hannah for over a year. The paternity results came back 3 days later. I opened the envelope in Arthur's office, my hands shaking. Mia is not your biological daughter, Arthur read aloud. The probability of paternity is 0%. I stared at the paper, at the cold, clinical words that destroyed my world. So, she's Kenji's almost certainly, Arthur confirmed. Combined with the evidence from the PI, we have a strong case. Hannah committed marriage fraud for immigration purposes. She's been conducting an affair throughout your marriage. She's been facilitating a relationship between Mia and her biological father without your knowledge or consent. What are my options? Arthur leaned back in his chair. You can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. Given that Mia isn't biologically yours, and you didn't know this when you married Hannah, you have no legal obligation for child support. In fact, you could potentially sue Hannah and the Sato family for fraud. What about Mia? My voice cracked. I know I'm not her biological father, but I love her. She calls me Dada. That's more complicated, Arthur admitted. In Ontario, you could apply to be recognized as a step-parent or for access rights. But given the circumstances and the fact that Mia's biological father is involved and wants a relationship, a judge might rule that a clean break is in everyone's best interest. Everyone except Mia, I said bitterly. She's 2 years old. She doesn't understand why Dada suddenly disappeared. Arthur's expression was sympathetic but firm. Liam, I know this is painful, but Mia has 2 biological parents who want to raise her. You need to think about your own well-being here. This family used you. They defrauded you. Walking away is not only legally sound, it's probably the healthiest choice. I filed for divorce the next day. The grounds were adultery and marriage fraud with the intent to obtain Canadian citizenship. I also filed a lawsuit against Hannah and Takeshi Sato for damages related to the fraud, seeking the return of all money I'd spent supporting Mia, all money I'd contributed to our marital home, and compensation for emotional distress. The Sato family's response was swift and aggressive. They hired Marcus Goldstein, one of Toronto's most expensive family lawyers. Within a week, I received a countersuit. Hannah was seeking spousal support, claiming she'd given up her career to raise Mia. She wanted half the appreciation value of my stock options for my tech company. The Satos were claiming I was emotionally abusive and had abandoned my daughter. They're going to fight dirty, Arthur warned me. Rich families like this don't accept defeat gracefully. He was right. Over the next month, the Satos launched a comprehensive campaign to destroy my credibility. Suddenly, stories appeared on social media, anonymous accounts claiming I'd been neglectful, that I'd ignored Mia, that I'd been verbally abusive to Hannah. Old colleagues from my Toronto tech company started receiving calls from people asking about my character, my work performance, and whether I'd ever seemed unstable. My boss called me into her office. Liam, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you going through something personal? I explained the situation as professionally as I could. My boss, Karen Miller, listened carefully. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, she said when I finished. For what it's worth, I think you're handling it with incredible maturity. But I have to tell you, someone's been calling our HR department claiming you've been embezzling company funds, and that we should audit your accounts. My blood went cold. That's completely false. I know, Karen assured me. We did a routine check just to be thorough. Everything's clean. But Liam, whoever is doing this is serious about damaging your reputation. I called Arthur immediately. The Satos are trying to frame me for embezzlement now. They're calling my company, making false accusations. Arthur swore, which I'd never heard him do before. That's actionable. That's defamation. But Liam, we need to be strategic here. If we push too hard, they might escalate. These people have resources and clearly no ethical boundaries. What do you suggest? We build our case carefully. Document everything. Every call, every accusation, every lie. When we go to court, we bury them with evidence. We don't just win the divorce. We make sure they face consequences for what they've done. The next Tuesday, I called in sick to work. Veronica Chong had tipped me off that Kenji would be at my townhouse. As usual, Hannah apparently hadn't warned him that I knew about the affair. I parked down the street in Veronica's surveillance van, camera equipment trained on my front door. At 10:35 a.m., Kenji's black Tesla pulled up. He got out, straightened his expensive suit, and walked to my door like he owned the place. Hannah opened it, and even from a distance, I could see her smile. They kissed right there in my doorway. Veronica's camera captured every second. That's solid evidence, Veronica murmured, adjusting the lens. Time-stamped, high resolution, no ambiguity. Kenji stayed for 3 hours. When he left, Mia was with him and Hannah. They drove away together, presumably to some play date or lunch. The perfect little family, just missing the husband who paid all the bills. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call. Mr. Caldwell, this is Inspector Graves with the RCMP Immigration Division. I'd like to speak with you about your wife, Hannah Sato Caldwell. My heart raced. What about her? We've received information suggesting she may have entered into a fraudulent marriage for the purpose of obtaining Canadian citizenship. Would you be willing to provide a statement? I met with Inspector Graves at an RCMP office in downtown Toronto. He was a stern-looking man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes. Mr. Caldwell, I need to be clear about something, he said after I'd explained the situation. If your wife committed marriage fraud, she could face serious consequences. Her permanent residency could be revoked. She could be deported. Are you comfortable with that outcome? I thought about Hannah, about the woman I'd loved, about the lies she told. She used me, I said quietly. She married me to get citizenship, conducted an affair throughout our marriage, lied about our daughter's paternity, and is now trying to destroy my reputation and take my money. Yes, Inspector, I'm comfortable with her facing legal consequences. Over the next hour, I provided everything. The details of what I'd overheard at the dinner party, the PI's evidence of the affair, the paternity test results, and the timeline of our relationship and marriage. Inspector Graves took notes, his expression growing darker. Mr. Caldwell, this is one of the more blatant cases of marriage fraud I've encountered. The fact that her family was openly discussing it, that there's a biological child involved with another man, and that the affair has been ongoing. This is clear-cut. What happens now? We open an investigation. We'll interview Mrs. Sato Caldwell, Mr. Nakamura, and possibly members of her family. We'll examine the timeline of your relationship, her citizenship application, and financial records. If we find sufficient evidence of fraud, and based on what you've told me, we will refer the case to the Crown for potential prosecution. Could she go to jail? Possibly, Inspector Graves said. Marriage fraud can result in up to 5 years in prison or a $100,000 fine. At minimum, her permanent residency will be revoked, and she'll be removed from Canada. After the meeting, I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands shaking. I'd just set in motion the potential deportation of my wife, Mia's mother. Was I doing the right thing? Then I remembered Emmy's tinkling laugh. He has no idea Kenji is the real father. I remembered Hannah's cold voice. I'll take half his stock options. I remembered Takashi's casual dismissal. Liam is useful for now. I started the engine and drove home. The court date for the divorce was set for October 15th, 5 months after the dinner party that destroyed my life. In those 5 months, several things happened. First, the RCMP investigation moved quickly. Inspector Graves' team interviewed Kenji Nakamura, who initially denied everything but eventually admitted to the affair when confronted with photographic evidence. Under pressure, Kenji revealed that Hannah had approached him about fathering a child specifically to make the marriage to me look more legitimate. A Canadian citizen raising a child was less likely to face scrutiny from immigration officials. Second, Kenji's ex-wife, Isabella Nakamura, reached out to me directly. She asked to meet at a Starbucks in Yorkville. Isabella was elegant and poised, a corporate lawyer with steel in her spine. "I want you to know I'm testifying in your divorce case," she said, stirring her latte. Kenji destroyed our marriage for that woman. I lost 15 years to him. If I can help ensure she faces consequences, I will. "I appreciate that," I said. "I'm sorry about what happened to your marriage." Isabella smiled bitterly. "So am I. But Liam, you need to understand something. These people, Hannah, the Satos, they view people like us as tools." Kenji came from poverty in Taiwan. He clawed his way up in real estate, made millions, and became exactly the kind of person he once resented. Hannah and her family are old money from Japan. They see everyone as either useful or useless. You were useful, until you weren't. Third, my case against the Sato family for fraud gained traction. Arthur had connected me with a civil litigation specialist named Jessica Pearson. She was a pit bull in designer heels. "Here's what we're going to do," Jessica explained during our strategy session. "We're going to prove that the Satos knowingly facilitated marriage fraud. Takashi Sato helped Hannah develop this scheme. They planned it. They executed it. They benefited from it. You paid for Mia's care, Hannah's lifestyle, everything. That's fraud, pure and simple. Can we win?" I asked. Jessica smiled grimly. "Oh, we're going to win. And we're going to make sure the Satos pay for every cent they stole from you, plus damages." Fourth, and most painfully, I had to say goodbye to Mia. Hannah had temporary custody pending the divorce, and my access was supervised due to her accusations of emotional abuse. Accusations that had no evidence, but still required me to defend myself. The last time I saw Mia was at a supervised visitation center in Mississauga. She ran to me, her little arms outstretched. "Dada, Dada." I scooped her up, breathing in the baby shampoo smell of her hair. We played with blocks. We read The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She showed me a scraped knee she'd gotten at the playground, and I kissed it better, the way I always had. When the hour was up, Mia cried. "No go, Dada. Stay." "I have to go, sweetie," I said, my voice breaking. "But Dada loves you so much." "Love you too, Dada." The supervisor, a kind woman named Rosa, gently took Mia from my arms. As they walked away, Mia looked back at me, confused and hurt. "Dada, Dada." I drove back to my hotel room and cried for 2 hours. The court hearing was held in Toronto Family Court. Judge Helen Morrison presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for cutting through manipulation. Arthur presented our case methodically. He introduced the paternity test, showing I wasn't Mia's biological father. He presented Veronica Chang's surveillance, photographs showing the ongoing affair. He brought in Isabella Nakamura, who testified about her ex-husband's relationship with Hannah, including specific dates and details that proved the affair predated Mia's birth. Then Arthur played his trump card. He called Dr. Simon Wu, an immigration fraud expert who'd reviewed the timeline of my relationship with Hannah. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Wu testified, "this case exhibits all the hallmarks of premeditated marriage fraud." Ms. Sato Caldwell initiated the relationship with Mr. Caldwell shortly after her student visa was set to expire. She accelerated the relationship timeline, pushing for marriage within 6 months. She became pregnant immediately, which is a common tactic to make the marriage appear more legitimate to immigration officials. Throughout the marriage, she maintained a separate relationship with the biological father of her child. The pattern is clear and deliberate. Hannah's lawyer, Marcus Goldstein, tried to paint me as a cold, calculating man who was abandoning a child-eyed claim to love. Mr. Caldwell raised Mia as his daughter for 2 years. Now he wants to simply walk away because the marriage didn't work out. Arthur objected immediately. "Your Honor, Mr. Goldstein is mischaracterizing the situation. Mr. Caldwell didn't know Mia wasn't his biological child until after discovering the fraud. He was deceived about the most fundamental aspect of his family life. Judge Morrison agreed. Sustained. Mr. Goldstein, your client committed fraud. Let's not pretend this is a simple case of a marriage that didn't work out. The testimony from Inspector Graves was devastating for Hannah's case. He explained the RCMP's investigation, the evidence of marriage fraud, and the fact that Hannah's permanent residency was under review and likely to be revoked. Ms. Sato Caldwell has admitted under questioning that she married Mr. Caldwell primarily to obtain Canadian citizenship, Inspector Graves stated. She has also admitted to conducting an affair with Mr. Kenji Nakamura throughout the marriage and to deliberately deceiving Mr. Caldwell about Mia's paternity. Hannah took the stand in her own defense. She cried, speaking softly about how she'd fallen in love with me, how the affair with Kenji was a mistake, how she wanted to make things right. I do love Liam, she said, tears streaming down her face. I made terrible choices. I was confused, but I never meant to hurt him. Arthur cross-examined her without mercy. Ms. Sato Caldwell, when did you first meet Kenji Nakamura? About 4 years ago. Before you met Mr. Caldwell? Yes. And when did your romantic relationship with Mr. Nakamura begin? Hannah hesitated. Around the same time. So you were in a relationship with Mr. Nakamura when you met my client? It was complicated. Yes or no? Yes. Did you know you were pregnant with Mr. Nakamura's child when you married my client? Another hesitation. I wasn't sure. Arthur pulled out a medical record. Your Honor, this is a prenatal record from Dr. Susan Park's office, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. It shows Ms. Sato Caldwell was 8 weeks pregnant at that time. The conception date predates her first meeting with Mr. Caldwell by 2 weeks. The courtroom went silent. Hannah's face crumpled. You knew, Arthur said quietly. You knew Mia wasn't my client's child. You married him anyway. You let him fall in love with a child you knew wasn't his, all while conducting an affair with the biological father. Is that correct? I was scared, Hannah sobbed. I didn't know what to do. You could have told the truth, Arthur said. You chose fraud instead. Judge Morrison called a recess. When we returned, her face was set in granite. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, Judge Morrison began. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of marriage fraud and deception I've encountered in my 30 years on the bench. Ms. Sato Caldwell, you knowingly deceived Mr. Caldwell about fundamental aspects of your marriage and family life. You married him while pregnant with another man's child. You conducted an affair throughout your marriage. You facilitated a relationship between your child and her biological father without your husband's knowledge or consent. You defrauded him financially and emotionally. Judge Morrison turned to me. Mr. Caldwell, I want to acknowledge the pain you must be feeling. You entered into this marriage in good faith. You raised a child you believed to be yours. You provided financially and emotionally for a family that was built on lies. The law cannot undo what was done to you, but it can provide some measure of justice. She turned back to Hannah. The divorce is granted on grounds of adultery and fraud. Mr. Caldwell is not the biological father of Mia Sato Caldwell and has no legal obligation for child support. Given the fraudulent nature of the marriage, I'm denying your request for spousal support entirely. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. All property and assets Mr. Caldwell brought into the marriage remain his sole property. Hannah's face went pale. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm awarding Mr. Caldwell damages in the amount of $150,000 to compensate for financial fraud and emotional distress. This amount represents the money he spent supporting a child under false pretenses, plus damages for the deliberate deception. Goldstein stood up. Your Honor, my client doesn't have access to those funds. Then her family will pay it, Judge Morrison said coldly. The evidence shows they were complicit in this fraud. They facilitated it, benefited from it, and actively worked to deceive Mr. Caldwell. They can pay the damages. The civil case against Takeshi Sato proceeded separately. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Jessica Pearson had built an airtight case showing that Takashi had knowingly participated in the marriage fraud scheme, had benefited from my financial support of Hannah and Mia, and had actively worked to sabotage my reputation when the truth emerged. The settlement came to $400,000 plus legal fees. Takashi's lawyer had advised him to settle rather than go to trial, where the damages could potentially be much higher. Mr. Sato, the mediator, said during the settlement conference, "Your exposure here is significant. The Crown is considering criminal fraud charges. A settlement demonstrates good faith and might influence the prosecutor's decision." Takashi, for the first time since I'd known him, looked old and defeated. He signed the settlement agreement without a word. The immigration case concluded in January. Hannah's permanent residency was revoked. She was given 60 days to voluntarily leave Canada or face deportation. Kenji Nakamura, as a Canadian citizen, was granted primary custody of Mia. Hannah would return to Japan with Mia, where Kenji had agreed to regularly visit and provide financial support. Inspector Graves called me with the news. The Crown decided not to pursue criminal charges given that she's being removed from the country. But Mr. Caldwell, she won't be allowed back into Canada. If she tries to re-enter, she'll be arrested. What about Mia? I asked, even though I knew the answer. She's leaving with her mother. I'm sorry, he added. I know you cared for her. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my apartment. I'd won legally, financially, morally. I'd won everything. So why did it feel like I'd lost? 3 weeks later, I received a letter. It was from Hannah, postmarked from Osaka. Liam, I know you have no reason to read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate, but they're all I have. You deserved the truth from the beginning. You deserved a wife who loved you for who you are, not for what you could provide. You deserved to know about Mia's paternity. You deserved honesty, respect, and loyalty. I gave you none of those things. I've had months to think about what I did and why. The truth is, I was scared and selfish. My visa was expiring. Kenji wasn't ready to leave his wife. My family was pressuring me to secure my status in Canada. You were kind and decent and exactly what I needed at that moment. So I used you. Mia asks about you sometimes. She calls Kenji Papa now, but she still has memories of you. She remembers you reading to her at night. She remembers how you would make funny voices for the characters. She remembers feeling safe with you. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the years I stole or the trust one destroyed. But I want you to know that while I married you for the wrong reasons, there were moments, real moments, when I felt something genuine. When Mia was born and you cried holding her. When you would dance with me in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. When you looked at me like I was the most important person in your world. Those moments were real for me, even if everything else was a lie. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope you find someone who gives you the love and honesty you always deserved. Hannah. I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away in a drawer. I didn't respond. What was there to say? 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Montgomery, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me work through the anger, the grief, and the sense of violation that came from being deceived so thoroughly. You are not responsible for what was done to you, Dr. Montgomery said during one session. Hannah and her family made choices. They chose to lie, to deceive, to use you. Those were their choices, not yours. You did nothing wrong. Then why do I feel guilty? I asked. Why do I feel like I should have known, should have seen the signs? Because you trusted your wife. Because you believed in your marriage. Because you loved Mia as your daughter. Those aren't weaknesses, Liam. Those are the qualities of a good man. The fact that those qualities were exploited doesn't make them less valuable. Through therapy, I learned to separate who I was from what had been done to me. I learned that being deceived didn't make me stupid or weak. I learned that my love for Mia was real, even if the circumstances of her life were false. I learned to forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. I also learned that trust could be rebuilt, just slowly and carefully. A year after the divorce, I met someone. Her name was Claire Davidson, a fellow software engineer at my company. We'd worked together for years, but I'd been married and she'd been focused on her career. After my divorce became office knowledge, Claire had sent me a kind email. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. If you ever need a friend, I'm here." We started as friends. Coffee breaks turned into lunch meetings. Lunch meetings turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains. Claire knew my history. I'd been honest about everything from the beginning. "I need to move slowly," I told her during one of our early dates. "I need to rebuild trust. That's going to take time." Claire smiled, her green eyes warm and understanding. "I'm not going anywhere, Liam. Take all the time you need." 2 years after the dinner party that changed my life, I stood in the Toronto courthouse again. This time, it wasn't for a divorce. It was to finalize the adoption of a 7-year-old boy named James. Claire and I had gotten married a year earlier, a small ceremony in Whistler with close friends and family. Shortly after, we'd started the adoption process. James had been in the foster system for 3 years after his biological parents lost custody due to neglect. He was quiet, cautious, with dark eyes that had seen too much pain. The first time James called me Dad, I cried. So did Claire. Now, as Judge Morrison, yes, the same judge who'd presided over my divorce, signed the final adoption papers, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete happiness. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said, shaking my hand. "I remember your case, Mr. Caldwell. I'm glad to see you found your family." James held my hand tightly as we left the courthouse. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate, Dad?" "Absolutely, buddy. Whatever flavor you want." That night, after James was in bed, Claire and I sat on our balcony overlooking the city skyline. The lights sparkled in the distance. "Do you ever think about her?" Claire asked quietly. "About Hannah?" I considered the question. "Sometimes. I think about how I let myself be deceived. But mostly I think about what I learned." "What did you learn?" "That love should be built on truth. That family isn't just biology. It's commitment and presence and showing up every day. That trust is the most valuable thing you can give someone and the most painful thing to have broken. And that sometimes when everything falls apart, it's making space for something better." Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad I get to be part of your something better." "Me too." Inside, James called out, "Dad, can you come here? I had a bad dream." I stood up, kissed Claire's forehead, and went to my son. Because that's what fathers do. Not biological fathers, or legal fathers, or any other qualifier. Just fathers. They show up. If there's anything I want people to take from my story, it's this. Being deceived doesn't make you a fool. It makes you someone who is capable of trust, and that's not a weakness. When someone lies to you, manipulates you, uses you, that's a reflection of their character, not yours. But here's the harder truth, the one I learned through therapy and time and painful growth. You have to be willing to trust again. Because the alternative is living in a cage of suspicion and fear. And that's no life at all. Trust, but verify. Love, but with eyes open. Give your heart, but protect it too. And most importantly, understand that family isn't defined by blood or genes or legal documents. Family is defined by who shows up day after day, in good times and bad. Hannah taught me what betrayal looks like. Claire and James taught me what genuine love looks like. Both lessons were necessary, even though only one brought joy. The Sato family's empire in Canada collapsed after the court cases. Takeshi's business partners, spooked by the fraud revelations and the negative publicity, forced him out of the company he'd built. Takeshi and Emmy moved back to Japan, their reputation in Toronto's business community destroyed. Rin tried to distance himself from the scandal, claiming he'd known nothing about the marriage fraud. Nobody believed him. The recording I'd made, inadmissible in court, but very much shareable online, found its way to social media. Within days, everyone knew exactly what the Sato family had said about me. In their own words, Kenji Nakamura's real estate career suffered, too. When clients learned he'd fathered a child with a married woman while still married himself, many took their business elsewhere. Isabella, his ex-wife, made sure everyone in their social and professional circles knew exactly who Kenji was. Last I heard, he'd moved to Vancouver to escape the scandal. As for Mia, I think about her often. She'd be 5 years old now, starting kindergarten, learning to read. I wonder if she remembers me at all, or if I've faded into the vague collection of early childhood memories that feel more like dreams than reality. Sometimes I imagine running into her someday when she's grown. Would she recognize me? Would she want to know the truth about how her family came to be? Would she judge her mother harshly? Or would she understand the desperation that drove Hannah's choices? I don't know. What I do know is that I gave Mia genuine love for the time we had together. And no amount of fraud or deception can change that. Those bedtime stories were real. Those scraped knees I kissed better were real. That love was real. It just wasn't enough to overcome the lies it was built on. My story isn't unique. Thousands of people experience betrayal in relationships every year. Some cases involve fraud, like mine. Others involve simpler deceptions, affairs, financial lies, hidden addictions. But the pain is universal. The shattering moment when you realize the person you trusted most has been lying to you. If you're reading this and you've experienced similar betrayal, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me in those first dark months. It's not your fault. You didn't miss the signs or should have known better. Manipulative people are skilled at deception. That's what makes them dangerous. You're allowed to grieve. Grieve the relationship you thought you had. Grieve the future you imagined. Grieve the person you believed your partner to be. All of that grief is valid. You will survive this. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. I know the pain seems endless. But humans are remarkably resilient. You will find a way through. Seek help. Therapy, support groups, trusted friends. Don't try to process this trauma alone. I waited too long to see a therapist, and I regret that delay. Document everything. If there are legal or financial implications, protect yourself. Keep records. Save messages. Gather evidence. I'm grateful I hired Veronica Chong when I did. Don't let betrayal make you bitter. This is the hardest lesson, the one I'm still learning. It's easy to become cynical, to wall yourself off from future relationships, to view everyone with suspicion. But that's not healing. That's just trading one form of pain for another. Finally, understand that justice and healing are two different things. I got justice. The courts ruled in my favor. The Satos paid damages. Hannah was deported. But justice didn't heal me. Time, therapy, and new love did that. 3 years after that dinner party, my life looks nothing like I imagined it would. But in many ways, it's better. I have a wife who chose me knowing my full history, who sees my scars and loves me anyway. I have a son who calls me dad and means it, who trusts me to keep him safe and never disappoint him. I have a career I'm good at, friends who supported me through the darkest time of my life, and a therapist who helped me understand that my worth isn't determined by other people's treatment of me. I have peace most days. And on the days when I don't have peace, I have the tools to work through the pain until it passes. The glass that shattered on the Satos marble floor that night destroyed more than just a champagne flute. It shattered my marriage, my family, my understanding of who I was and what my life meant. But like any broken thing, the pieces can be gathered and reassembled into something new. The cracks will always show. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the cracks part of the object's beauty rather than something to hide. That's how I think about my life now. The breaks are there, visible and real, but they're also part of what makes me who I am. I'm a man who was betrayed and survived. A man who loved a child who wasn't his and doesn't regret that love. A man who trusted the wrong person and learned to trust again. A man who fell apart and put himself back together. Gold in the cracks. That dinner party was the worst night of my life. But it was also, in a strange way, the beginning of my real life. The life where I choose truth over comfortable lies. Where I choose genuine connection over surface-level harmony. where I choose to be vulnerable again, even knowing the risks. Because in the end, that's what it means to be fully human. To risk being hurt in exchange for the possibility of genuine connection. Hannah and her family taught me what it looks like when people fail that test. Claire and James show me every day what it looks like when people pass it. And me? I'm still learning, still healing, still growing. But I'm no longer that man sitting at a dinner table, smiling politely while people mock him in a language they think he doesn't understand. I understand now. All of it. The words, the betrayal, the lessons, the path forward. I understand that broken things can be made beautiful again. That trust can be rebuilt. That love, real love, honest love, is worth the risk of being hurt. The champagne glass shattered, but I didn't. And that makes all the difference.